I went somewhere even my own shadow couldn't find me. But some letters catch up faster. I sat on the hard bed in a room that smelled of must and abandonment. The lamp overhead flickered as if mocking me. In my hands, a letter. Old, heavy, like a weight pressing on my chest. It smelled of dampness, rust, and cheap perfume she used to wear. I recognized the handwriting immediately. But not hers. His. The name of her ex, the one I tried to burn out of her story, stared at me from the envelope like a scar that would never heal. I thought I had escaped. The city was left behind, friends blocked and erased. I had even stopped recognizing my own reflection in the fogged-up mirrors of nameless motels. But the past knows how to catch up silently on tiptoe. It hides in the crackle of the lamp, in the scent of cheap detergent on the sheets. It arrives as a letter with no return address. My fingers trembled, though the room was stifling. Opening the envelope was like ripping the bandage off an unhealed wound. I didn't want to read it. But didn't want is always weaker than must know. Inside, just a few lines, hastily scribbled. No apologies. No explanations. Only indifferent facts, like gunshots. She isn't who she seemed to be. You are the one she chose. Each word cut deeper than any knife because they didn't sound like accusations. They sounded like a truth I had always known, buried deep under my own fear. I remembered the way she laughed, throwing her head back, covering her mouth with her hand. Back then, I thought that laughter belonged to me. Maybe it never did. I remembered the smell of her hair on the pillow. The warmth of her body, which now felt alien. The letter slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor like discarded memories. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in a long time, I felt nothing. No pain. No anger. Only emptiness, heavy and cold, like a stone at the bottom of an old well. Some letters catch up faster, I thought. And I realized you can run from people, from cities, even from yourself. But you can't run from the truth. The truth always travels light. Back then, I didn't understand. The flashes of rage, the cold walls between us, the damp traces on the pillow beside me. I told myself, she's tired. She's lonely. She's a stranger. Those nights are etched in my memory as hollow, deaf voids. The house seemed to turn into a giant shell where every movement echoed back. I could hear the water whispering through the pipes, the old floorboards groaning under my steps, and her crying in the bathroom. I was half asleep the first time I heard it. At first, just broken breathing. Then muffled sobs, careful as if she were trying to drown them under the water. As if she was more afraid of me hearing her than of her own tears. I wanted to get up, to go to her, to ask, but what would I have said? Why do you cry while lying to me? Or maybe, why do I still hope? I pretended to sleep. A traitor to my own heart. When she came back to bed, her skin smelled of soap and something foreign. She curled up under the blanket, turned her back to me. I could hear her shoulders trembling. And all I could do was hold my breath. Not disturb her. Not shatter her fragile theater of normalcy. Now, sitting in a shabby motel with peeling walls, I understand. Her tears were not a plea for forgiveness. They were a farewell. Silent, wordless, final. I had tried to piece her actions together. Why did she shy away from my touch? Why did she laugh into emptiness where she used to laugh with me? Why did she once say, I love you, like an apology? I pieced these fragments in my mind like a broken puzzle, one that could never be completed. Too many pieces lost. Were stolen. And the more I remembered, the clearer it became. The crying in the bathroom wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of the end. A beginning I refused to recognize. That night, when I heard her tears for the first time, I should have gotten up. I should have spoken. But I chose silence. And now that silence is unbearable. I kept score. Secretly. Paranoid. Notes scribbled on scraps of paper, dates in my phone under nameless entries. Tiny clues, like shards of glass cutting into my palms every time I tried to put the story together. Then and now, I couldn't tell what I feared more. Catching her in a lie, or confirming my worst fears. She became like smoke, slipping away, untouchable. Close enough to see, but reach out and all you catch is emptiness. Her touches became rare and careful, as if measured out beforehand. As if every caress, every glance, was part of a script I didn't know. And still, the lines started to cross. Too many strange coincidences. Business trips to places she'd never been before. Late-night calls from unknown numbers. Messages deleted faster than I could ask about them. I tried to blame stress, tiredness, life. But the truth seeped through all excuses, like water through cracks in glass. Then I found the letter, by accident. Or maybe, deep down, I had been searching for it all along. An envelope without a stamp, tossed into our hallway like a bone to a dog. The further I read, the more I wanted to throw it away. Burn it. Forget it. But I kept going. My fingers trembled. My eyes clung to every letter, every date, every little detail that didn't match her words. The letter didn't name names, only facts, dates, descriptions of meetings that lined up exactly with her business trips. The very days she hadn't answered her phone. The very nights she came home late, smelling of someone else's shampoo and hollow apologies. Each line tore me apart. I wanted not to believe. I begged myself to close my eyes. But knowledge is like poison. One drop is enough to infect everything. When I finished reading, the world around me dulled. Sound, color, even my own breathing, everything grew thick and heavy, like moving through tar. I didn't throw the letter away. I hid it, like evidence of a crime that hadn't yet been committed, but had already left me bloodied and silent at the scene. I still hoped I was wrong. But deep down I knew, dates don't lie. Only people do. You're not afraid of loss. You're afraid of looking foolish for your belief. In the letter, he wrote simply, I know you think you know, but you know nothing. I closed my eyes, gripping the paper so hard my fingers turned white. Silence pulsed in my ears, the same heavy silence that had become familiar over the past few weeks. I remembered her smile, locked away like a secret. I remembered her hands, how they trembled, not from passion, as I had once naively thought. No, it was fear. Fear that no embrace could ever chase away. I sat in the kitchen, surrounded by the shadows of things that once meant home. The chairs we clung to when we danced. The mugs we used to drink morning coffee from, mixing silence and laughter. Now it all felt strangely foreign, as if I were staring at my life through a fogged-up window where faces and gestures blurred. I was foolish. Or maybe just blinded. I wanted too badly to believe that love was armor, something that could deflect the blows life dealt. But it turned out to be nothing more than a target. I had made myself easy prey, laying my heart bare with the trust of a boy who hadn't yet learned to fear betrayal. She was still there, physically, but every glance from her was like flipping a coin. Would it land on heads, the familiar tenderness, or tails, the cold indifference? I became painfully attuned to every tiny detail, like a tracker reading footprints, trying to understand who had trespassed into his home. I reread the letter over and over, as if somewhere inside it lay a code, a solution, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. But instead of answers, it only drove the needles of doubt deeper under my skin. You think you know? Yes, I thought I knew. I thought I knew her scent, her voice, her habits. I thought I knew our dreams. I thought I knew myself. And now, every look, every touch, every careless phrase echoed inside me. What if you didn't? What if I was only ever a temporary shelter, an umbrella for a short rain? The kitchen clock ticked away the seconds, each one a step dragging me farther from a past I was still desperately trying to hold on to. You're afraid of looking foolish for your belief. Yes, more than anything, I feared becoming a punchline in my own story. The one who loved alone, built alone, hoped alone. The letter slipped from my fingers onto the floor. The paper rustled softly, like autumn leaves beneath footsteps. I didn't pick it up. I just sat there, clutching the edge of the table like an anchor, trying to keep from sinking completely. The pain was no longer sharp. It had thickened, turned viscous, like old blood seeping from a wound that would never heal. And I understood this wasn't about her. Not about her secrets, her fears, her mistakes. It was about me. About the one who wanted too badly to believe that armor could save you. But had it ever really saved anyone? When it all began, she tried to stop it. But you didn't listen. The ex had written about her boss. About deals, dirty as asphalt under pouring rain. About threats that no walls, no money, no connections could keep out. I read his messages in fragments, barely paying attention. It all felt like background noise. Someone else's life, someone else's mess. I had enough of my own, or so I thought. That night, she came to me herself. No call, no warning. Just opened the door, quietly set her bag down in the hallway, and came into the bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, barely moving. For a long time, half an hour, maybe more, we sat in silence. I tried to talk. About the weather. About the news. About weekend plans. Each word fell at her feet, shattering against the icy silence I had mistaken for exhaustion. But it wasn't exhaustion. It was fear. I remember how she leaned toward me and hugged me. Not tightly. Not desperately. More like she was afraid I would crumble in her arms. She didn't ask for explanations. Didn't set conditions. Didn't ask questions. It wasn't whimsy. It was a scream. Silent, broken, torn from somewhere deep inside. And I thought she was just being moody. That she needed some sleep. That by morning everything would be back to normal. Coffee, her brief smile, the rush of daily life. I stroked her hair and promised myself for the 100th time. Later I'll talk to her seriously. Later I'll fix it. Later I'll understand. Later never came. I was too busy with my own shadows. Too caught up fighting enemies I had invented for myself. I didn't see how something inside her had begun to crack. How a fine fracture ran through her eyes, her voice, her breathing. We were still together then, but no longer whole. And when that first crack split between us, I turned away. I decided it was nothing. That the glass would hold. That love would mend it on its own. But glass doesn't shatter all at once. It groans under invisible pressure for a long, long time. And then it simply collapses into dust. Sometimes love smells like blood. Sometimes like something worse. She didn't sleep with him for money. Or for power. Or even out of fear. She slept with him for me. And that was the worst part. I sat in the hard chair of a grimy motel room among peeling walls and a ceiling stained by time. Outside, someone's TV blared. The air smelled of mildew and cheap tobacco. But I didn't hear it. I didn't feel it. Only the dull weight spreading inside me, filling my lungs instead of air. She was saving me with her body, her love, her pain. She was buying me time, paying off something much larger than a mere threat. Something ancient and faceless, like hunger or debt. I was her weakness. Her foolish, mortal burden, the one she had to pay for. I remembered how she smiled at me over breakfast. How she fixed my hair before I left for work. How she whispered, "Don't worry," too calmly, too surely. Back then I thought, this is love. Now I know. It was a farewell note stretched across weeks. My life cost her the betrayal of herself. Cost her the evenings when she came home with empty eyes. Cost her the silence between us, so heavy that if either of us spoke, the air itself would collapse like thin ice underfoot. Was it worth it? I stared at the wallpaper across the room as if there might be an answer hidden in the pattern. As if the very fabric of the world would whisper to me, yes, it was worth it, or no, you devalued yourself. But the wallpaper stayed silent. The world stayed silent. And so did I. Love is a strange currency. You can't pay for someone else's mistakes with it. It burns up the moment you try. I ran my fingers over the ring on my left hand, a thin band cold against my frozen skin. Once it symbolized a beginning. Now a trap. Sometimes love smells like blood. Sometimes something worse. Sometimes it smells like rot, a slow, unseen decay of everything bright inside you. And all that's left is to sit in a filthy motel and ask yourself, why? And to know there will be no answer. Only emptiness. Only me. And a price I never asked to pay. You thought she betrayed you. But the truth is you betrayed her first. I remembered. Not the betrayal. Not the lies. Not the pain. No. I remembered the look in her eyes once, full of despair. How she stood by the door, wrapped in a thin sweater like a shield. How her fingers nervously clutched at the sleeve, a gesture that carried more pleading than 100 words could. And how I, deaf to it all, pushed her away, throwing something cold and poisonous at her, just to win an argument I had already lost everything in. That was when she disappeared. Not from the house. Not from the marriage. From my eyes. I had forged her loneliness with my own hands. Silently, blow after blow. Every cold glance, every careless word, hammered nails into the coffin of the love I would later mourn so fiercely. The betrayal didn't begin in someone else's bed. It began in the silence I built between us. In the moments when I decided it was easier to lock my heart away than to risk being hurt again. When I chose suspicion over trust, control over tenderness. And when I blamed her for leaving, I forgot. I had walked out first. I just stayed standing in the doorway pretending I was still there. Love didn't die all at once. It smoldered through phone calls we no longer made. Through touches that grew rare, mechanical. Through dinners where silence sat at the table like a third, unseen guest. I called it life. She called it hope. Until she stopped calling it anything at all. Now I see. Her betrayal wasn't a knife in my back. It was a cry for help I ignored too long. I remembered how once she looked at me like I was her whole world. And how slowly she learned to look through me as if I were no longer there. And maybe I was the one who started disappearing first. Piece by piece. Every time I chose pride over kindness. Every time I heard pain in her voice and looked away. Every time I treated my loneliness as a tragedy, never noticing that she was there too, unseen, but there. We always blame the other for betrayal. But sometimes the worst betrayal is betraying the person you once promised yourself to be. While you ran, she stayed to burn for you. The last lines of the letter read, "She asked me to tell you I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. So that when it's all over, you'll know I loved you. Even in this." I read those words out loud into the empty room like a prayer no one was left to hear. My voice trembled, but I didn't try to stop it. Every syllable rang through the silence like a crack through glass, thin, almost invisible at first, but inevitably growing. The lamp flickered once and went out. The room sank into twilight as if reality itself could no longer bear the weight of either light or truth. I stayed seated, the letter heavy in my hands, a heavy like a lifetime. Once her voice had been my anchor. Now her words were scissors cutting through the last fragile thread that still tied me to her. I remembered how she had stood by the door that final day, hesitant, unfamiliar. I thought she was choosing to run. I was wrong. She was choosing to pay. I ran my fingers over the paper, feeling the roughness of the ink as if it were her palm, cold, alien. I loved you. Even in this. Even in betrayal? Even when everything I believed in turned out to be a lie. The wind howled outside, and somewhere far off, an unlatched gate banged against its frame. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting. What would I do now? Tear up the letter? Burn it? Forget? But I simply folded it carefully, the way you fold a flag over a grave. Because even betrayal, even pain were part of the story we had written together. Whether I wanted them to be or not. When I rose from the chair, the floor creaked under my foot. The letter stayed behind, a small white rectangle adrift in a sea of gray shadows. I didn't look back. While you ran, she stayed to burn for you. And now only the ashes know who truly lost everything. Into pieces. Into a handful of nothing. I wanted to forget. I wanted revenge. I wanted to sink into the earth and never surface again. The letter brought neither relief nor understanding. It was a blunt knife, no blood, no sharp pain, only a slow, spreading cold that hollowed out my bones. At some point, I closed my eyes. And I saw her. Not the one standing under a dim streetlight with a stranger. Not the one laughing into her phone, covering the screen with her hand. The one sitting in the kitchen wearing an old t-shirt, cradling a mug of tea, her eyes tired, rambling about the future. "You know," she said, "I'd like a house with green shutters." And I nodded back then, not really listening. Now I chased her voice through the burning silence like a drowning man grasping for air. You can't mourn the loss of something that never truly existed. And that kills harder than anything else. The wind picked up the scraps of the letter, carrying them down the asphalt. I stood and watched the tiny pieces disappear into the dark. As if I, too, was disappearing slowly, invisibly, without a chance to return. A car passed by. Its headlights flickered. Some hollow song about new beginnings crackled through the radio. I didn't even flinch. I was too empty to feel. Sometimes I think death isn't the end. Death is the moment you realize you've been forgotten. That your whole journey amounts to nothing more than a handful of ash in a motel trash bin. I ran my hand over my face. Warm ash clung to my fingers. And you know what the worst part is? It didn't even burn anymore. Some forgivenesses cannot be asked for. They can only be carried like a scar. I drove even further. So far that even the GPS gave up first. Only empty highways remained, endless fields, forests grayed out by mist. No signal. No familiar faces. Not even the peeling signs of motels where we once fell asleep to the hum of cheap air conditioners. Nothing that could remind me of her. Or of who I once was. Only the road. And the kind of silence that clogs your ears. I didn't pray for forgiveness. I knew some sins aren't absolved, not by words, not by time. They grow inside you like rust under the skin. Silent. Forever. All that remained was memory. Her eyes, the last time they met mine and recoiled as if burned. Her tears not loud, not hysterical, but heavy, almost tangible. And me, the man who realized too late what it meant to be loved. And how easy it was to destroy it. Now I understood. Love isn't vows. It isn't photographs on the walls. It isn't promises made at sunrise. Love is in the small things. A glance over the shoulder. A cup of tea left on the windowsill. Her hand brushing mine for the briefest moment. The small things I failed to notice while there was still time. I tried to drown out the memories with the crunch of tires over gravel. with the creak of my steps across the broken boards of abandoned gas stations, with endless nameless roads leading nowhere. But memory clung to me like a splinter under the skin. The deeper I tried to dig it out, the more it hurt. Some forgivenesses can't be asked for. They become a part of you, first as a fine crack inside, then as a scar that never heals. They can't be erased like an old tape. You can only carry them, like an invisible weight on your heart, a reminder of who you were and who you will never be again. I stopped at a nameless crossroads, where the road split into 3 directions, each as empty as the next. I killed the engine, rolled down the window, and let the wind fill the car with the scent of wet earth, withered leaves, and distant fires. For the first time in a long time, I was alone with myself. No illusions, no excuses, just me and the scar that now belonged to me. I didn't know where the road led, and maybe that was for the best. Because sometimes salvation isn't in going back. It's in moving forward, even if there's no one left waiting at home.